Hello everybody. Hello and welcome. This is Vonage Developer. This is Vonage Knowledge Quest. Your problems are solutions. I'm sorry, I was paid to say it that way, and I'll now talk like a normal human. Hello everyone. How's it going? So first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for coming. I'm not quite sure how many people are here. Let's see. There's a few people in. Hello to you all. Just want to say first of all, thank you for joining us. And if you are interested, please put your programming language in the chat. Please let us know what you're here for, all those kinds of things. Any problems that you're interested in, we're going to be talking about. We're happy for this to be a two-way thing. So please do be in touch. Please do write in the chat. And if you really want to, we can even get you on stage. Bad news for you, I'm afraid, Leon. Our PHP advocate is ill and sick today. I'm actually
But
pretending to be him
Chuck's a
right now.
PHP guy, so
But we can
he
definitely
can
still
jump in,
help
I'm
you with a
sure.
question if you have one. So before we get started, I'll introduce myself and I'll let the team introduce themselves too. So my name is Max. I'm our Python developer advocate. So if you have Python issues, shout at me, shout loudly. And we can definitely make that work. I work on our Python SDK and various things related to that. Anyone else like to introduce themselves?
I'll go first. Next, I should say. So I'm Chuck Reeves. I'm the senior JavaScript developer advocate. I work mainly on our Node Server SDK and our Vonage CLI, which will have some exciting news coming out in the next month or early next year. So look forward to some announcements on that.
I'm
Awesome.
very much looking forward to those. I'll go next. My name's Carl. I'm also part of the developer experience team, so I'm the Ruby developer advocate on the team. I kind of maintain the Ruby SDK and other various bits of Ruby tooling. So yeah, happy to be here and to meet you all today.
Sina?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sina. I'm the Java developer advocate, and I also do some Kotlin as well. So I maintain the Java and the newly released, all shiny, all singing, all dancing Kotlin SDK. So yeah, any questions about Java and Kotlin? Happy to help out.
Awesome, cool. Well, first of all, I'll just invite if there is anyone here who's got a specific question, anything they'd really like to know about using Vonage APIs or something that they've been trying or that they've got an issue with, please do put it in the chat or say that you want to ask a question, and we can definitely talk about that now. And if we'll just give you a minute maybe just to do that, just in case there's anyone who's got anything, and then if not, we've got other things that we can definitely show you about Vonage APIs and about the tools we use at Vonage as well. So even if you're here and you're not here for a specific question, we can still show you some kind of cool stuff that we think might be interesting for you. Just give that a minute in case anyone has a specific pressing burning question. Oh, here we go. Leon has a question. Welcome, Leon. I have a question about the voice API. I need to send a DTMF tone on an outbound call and then proceed to a speech to text. How might I do this? That's a great question. I'm going to say NCCOs all the way. Is anyone who'd like to talk through this one with Leon? Chuck, for example.
Sina might be a little better because he's closer to the voice stuff.
Good point.
Well,
Sina?
Yeah, sure. So you'd like to start the call, or would you like to send DTMF to an existing call? Because there's different ways to do it. So of course, with the NCCOs, you can, when you start the call, set that as like the first action, and then play the speech to text. So you can do that through the SDK or through the REST API. Would you like to do that to an existing call that's already in progress? That's what I'm trying to work out.
Yeah, my reading of that is on an outbound call. So it looks like they've made an outbound call and they want to then send a tone to that. Could you share existing call. Could you maybe see if you share your screen and maybe look at the voice API docs, so maybe we can show the element there in the NCCO?
Yes, sure.
Also, Leon, can you let us know what language you're using? I can pull up some code samples for you.
I think Leon is PHP based on the message just above. So
PHP from before. Yeah. There we
go. I'll just share my entire screen. So let's go to documentation and voice. So you're looking for, so you've already made the call and you want to play and use the DTMF. You want to play DTMF, so I think that's actually in the REST API. So there's two different things here. To play, if you have an existing call, you can play text-to-speech using the endpoint, and you can play DTMF as well using the endpoint as well, and that's in the SDKs too. So if I find the code samples, they should be here somewhere. Controlling play text-to-speech and play DTMF, that's right. So this is the text-to-speech. So for Java, for example, you can do the start talk. So you already have your call, right? So you have the UUID, and then you kind of build up what you want to do. Same Kotlin as well. You've got your call and everything else. So it's all there. And then with DTMF as well, you can do.
Maybe look at the PHP one as well, Sina.
PHP, yes. So for DTMF, so yes, they're two separate endpoints. If it's an existing call, so if you're making a fresh outbound call, then you specify on the NCCO. If you want to do it to an existing call, then it's on the REST API, if that makes sense. So that's why there's a separate endpoint for each of these. But if you wanted to do it on the initial call, then you'd specify that as part of the NCCO. So when you start the call, you could put in the NCCO, and there's code snippets in the SDKs for doing that. And then, yeah, I hope that makes sense.
It looks like the workflow that they've put another message in, saying that they've got a client. Basically, they're making a call. They need to press one, so send a DTMF, tone corresponding to pressing one on the keypad, and then sending a speech to text immediately after that. So I think it's also, maybe it would be good to talk about how you have multiple of these things together. So in general, what you'll do is you'll pass back an NCCO with different actions inside of that. I don't know if, Sina, if you want to go into how you would do one action, then the next action, because I think that's the part they'll need to do.
So that's if it's an that's if you're making the call initially, right? So when you make the call, you have the actions that you want to take on the call. So when you, sorry, if I go making calls, so here's an example. I'm not sure what language we're working.
Leon's PHP, if you've got PHP.
PHP, yes. So the thing with so if you're making a call like initially and you want to do the full workflow, you just add actions like the NCCO actions, right? So there's that, and then there's one for input as well for DTMF. So you want to capture input, then you're looking for the if you can find it here, the input action, right? So here's an example here in your exact use case. So you start.
Actually, I think reading this, it looks like Leon wants to send that speech to text. So I guess it'll be the talk action. I don't know if I'm reading that right, Leon. Maybe you could confirm which way around. I think we're reading it differently, but it looks like the use case is to send TTS.
Yeah, this is sending TTS. This is the talk. Oh,
no, you're on input.
Well, no. This input, right? This is an example of a full workflow, right? So you'd have your call, and these are the NCCOs, right? So there's a list of actions, right? And so the first action will be the talk, right? And then it'll be an input, And then these are like the DTMF configuration options for that input. See, this is all one action, hence the, right? And you configuring that action here. So this example is kind of what you want. And you can do that in the SDKs by adding to the actions. So if I go back to here, so here's the first part, right? That's the talk. Then you just add another one that's input. Does that make sense?
Leon says, yeah, that makes sense. I'll do the input action first. Yeah, that's great. Cool. I mean, maybe in context of a full application as well, how that would work, sort of if you've got that, my understanding is you'll need to then send an NCCO from somewhere that you've hosted that. Although actually, if this is the initial call, would you not have to do that?
You can do it from the initial call without having any webhooks set up.
Oh, cool.
Of course, like if you want to capture the input, then you need your webhooks. But to make the call, yeah, because like once the user starts entering stuff, you're gonna get events, right, sent to your. It'll be an event webhook. So the answer webhook will be like when they pick up the call, and the event webhook will be somewhere here. I think this is actually all event, yes. And then you'll get something there, like for example, if they do DTMF, you'll get an input event. It'll have these fields. Now I don't know how the PHP SDK handles kind of webhooks, but I can help with the Java one. So yeah.
Chuck, would you know about that maybe?
Yeah, so the PHP and the Node SDKs don't inherently capture webhooks because there's a lot of sort of bootstrapping around the web server around it. So like in Node, there's a lot, I'll just say, of web servers that you can use. PHP has a couple built in, but you also have to go and configure in most production environments. You're configuring like Apache or Nginx or God knows what else nowadays to handle that. So you really have to take the request in yourself and then decide which route you want to use and how you want to handle that input. I think Jim, our PHP developer advocate, does have some examples. I'm going to try to see if I can find some of them because I know he did a couple for some blog posts as well. But really, what you're doing is you're just getting a request coming in. You're checking that it came from us using your private key, public keys, and then you can act upon that and respond back to the call. Yeah, you got the webhook lockdown. Yeah, so that's good right there. You always want to make sure that you're checking your JWT coming in. It's probably worth noting to others in this channel that you need to make sure you set up your application properly and you're using the application webhooks correctly. You can only have one webhook per application. So be sure that if you're developing this, Sina is going to walk you through that right now in our dashboard, that you're not changing your production webhooks willy-nilly. It's probably best to have a new application that's testing everything, and then you can link your numbers back and forth. But yeah, as you see right here, for voice, the event URL is the one we're talking about. You're going to have to make sure that your webhook is configured properly to come in.
You can also use the CLI to do this, right, Chuck?
I'm not going to comment on that right now. Yes, you can. The V1 API CLI will use that. I guess I could spoil it now. Yes, we are working on a new version of the CLI, which should be coming out shortly, at which you can go ahead and update these webhooks a lot easier in terms of how it would work.
I'll also add that you can update these programmatically using the SDKs. So I can show you a Java example.
I will say Leon has said that he's got the webhook part locked down, and this the input is the new request that they're trying to get working with the sort of the client issue. But yeah, we can keep showing this just to sort of give some context as to how this would work for anyone else who's here. And then there's another question when we're done with this too. Sorry, give me 1 sec. I'm going to go close that blind so you can actually see what I look like.
And I also have a question to follow up on this for others who are on here. Leon mentioned that he has to press 1 on a prompt right there. So I'm assuming that there's a recorded voice saying press 1 to continue right there. So how can I react to that coming in? Is there sort of a speech to text option that we have, or do we have to do that processing on our own?
Sorry, what? Can I just stop sharing so I can read the question?
It's not a question posted in the chat. I'm just bringing it up right there that how would we build out a webhook to respond to text input that says press 1 to continue, let's say.
So the webhooks are like notifications, right? So if you want to build it to be interactive, what you're looking for is NCCOs. So when you make the call, you can respond using an answer URL as well. And you can also have connect actions as well. So you can have that go to your server and then respond with an NCCO from your server. If that makes sense.
I figured I'd just follow up with that question in there.
Yeah.
So
cool. Awesome. Leon, is there anything else that you're interested in, or should we move to our next caller for now? We do have another question in the chat, so we can just want to check that you're happy with everything there. Yes, will we add queues? Oh, that's a complex question.
I'm guessing you mean for like the oh, I thought you meant for like the moderation of the session rather than queuing as in like Apache Kafka kind of queuing.
do we maybe want to do the MongoDB question and then come back to the queues? Because queuing can be a longer thing, and we probably don't want to.
That's fair, yeah. So there is a question from Anujan here, who's asking the question, how do we connect Vonage API to MongoDB? Can you share a little bit more about your use case? You can either write in the chat, or if you'd like to, we can bring you live as well if you want to ask us the question and you have a chat with us too. I've been reminded that that's a feature that we can use on this new platform. So yeah, if you want to talk more, just tell me a bit more about that problem that you're having. Whilst we do that, I will say that we do have a few blog posts. In fact, we've got I think a 4-part blog series explaining how to use MongoDB and Vonage together. And maybe I'll drop a link to that first one in the chat while you're just asking that question there or filling out that the answer that you've got. I'll just paste a link here. This is an article that just explains a bit about how you'd use a Vonage API with MongoDB Atlas. But yeah, if you have a specific question on that, then please do let us know, or we can bring you live.
And I do have some comments with the Node SDK and Atlas. So I don't know if you're using our Node SDK or not.
Yeah, if you could tell us your language you're using, that would be great.
Yeah, so this way we know as well. And we also have a developer advocate who does a lot of integrations, and one of them was with Atlas and MongoDB. We can always reach out to him in the community Slack channel as well, if you have specific questions after this call that we're unable to answer here, just from knowledge and expertise. In fact, it's the author of that blog post who's the advocate, Chris Tankersley. He does a lot of work with the Atlas and Mongo. He's also doing work with, I think he's doing some Firebase stuff. He's doing a lot of video stuff. And another way to always sort of facilitate different communication platforms is we have Zapier, IR Those are always good things to use as well too, to try to quickly bridge things together if you want sort of low-code solutions. So
cool. Anujan, I don't know if you're still here. It looks like you're still in the in the chat. So it looks like you are here. Yeah, if you want to tell us a little bit more about your use case or what you're looking for and the language you're using, that will be really helpful. So we can try and work out how to help you a bit better. While we give Anujan just a minute to maybe think about what they want to ask, why don't we maybe just talk about what we're maybe going to show off a little bit of, if sort of either we run out of questions or we want to just give a bit of a break between questions. So from my end, I'm interested today in maybe showing off a bit of tooling for a monorepo structure for the SDK that I've been working on. So I'll be showing how to do things with Pants, which is a tool that you can use across multiple languages to manage and deal with monorepos. Would anyone else like to talk about what they might be presenting on today? I know, Chuck, you've got an interesting one.
I have my top 5 Neovim plugins to present on. Can always show
Sina,
that.
you got anything?
But I guess maybe we should go back to the queues question for now.
Yes, yeah, we will. I'm just giving Nugent a bit of time just to see if they do want to ask
Yeah.
anything there. What would you be talking about, Sina?
I was gonna do some evangelism for Maven because I think it's a very underrated tool compared to everyone's using Gradle now, and I have my opinions on that. So
Yeah, it's definitely underused outside of the Java community. So in that case, why don't we? It looks like Anujan is maybe still really having a deep think about what they want to ask. You're welcome to ask a little bit more there, Anujan, if you'd like to. Yeah, let's maybe go back to Leon's question, or actually, there is a new person in the chat too, who's just joined, it seems, as well. So welcome to this new person. Yeah, if you'd like to ask a specific question as well, you're very welcome to as well. And this is a sort of interaction which is two-way, so you are welcome to come with a problem and we'll try and help you out or talk about how you could find a solution. Let's see, Leon says, happy to chat via audio. Cool, okay. So maybe let's see let's see if anyone has another question, but for now, why don't we go back to Leon's question about queuing? And why don't we answer that? So we could invite Leon onto the stage if they want to have a chat with us via audio. That's totally fine by us. Should we do that now? I think so. So let me work out how to do that. Let's see.
I sent the invite.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, we should have Leon joining us. Here we go. Hey, Leon, how you doing?
Oh, can you hear me? Hello.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me? Hello, hello.
Yes, I can hear
Yeah, I
that.
can hear you. Can you hear us?
So right now, I manage all of the outbound calls, manage, make sure that I don't go over the rate limit and such. And so the question is, can I send, a batch of outbound requests to you guys, and then you guys process them one at a time so that I'm not managing failures, rate limiting, and all that stuff?
That's a great question, actually. I'm not sure. Does anyone else know the answer to that one?
On the API side, I don't like Sina might know more than me, like what's on the roadmap. But currently, I don't think there's any kind of functionality like that within the API endpoints themselves in terms of like batching requests. That's something you kind of have to configure yourself. Sina, are you aware of anything on the roadmap for voice along those lines?
nothing to do with queuing because you could achieve this through external systems, right? Because you could achieve this by just delaying requests, and there's a myriad of ways you can do this through various programming language constructs, through various systems, queuing systems, scheduling, etc. So it's really the API will do what you tell it to do when you tell it to do that. So I think that's more of an application concern.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, it's a valid question. I'm just thinking. I mean,
Are you hitting rate limits right now? Because if your one application is handing off a lot of calls, then that could be the rate limit there. But as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, excuse me, it's based off of the endpoint that you're calling and how quickly you're doing it. So are you actually hitting rate limits now?
Yeah, no, luckily enough, I was able to get my CPS increased. I mean, it costs money, but just handling a whole bunch of calls at once, and I'm the only developer on the project, it just can get hairy dealing with that aspect of things. So I was just asking.
I
I don't know if you have
believe.
anything on the blog about like building like an exponential backoff. I seem to remember something. It might be quite
yeah, that
old
sounds
now, but
familiar. Let me Google that.
I'll see if I can track that down. I don't know, like in PHP world, I guess Laravel, whether there's anything built, like if you're using a particular framework or something, they might have like built-in rate limit stuff. Like I know in the latest Rails version, for example, Rails 8, there's like built-in rate limiting for your routes. There might be something similar in Laravel. I have no idea, to be honest. Do you know, Chuck, if there's something like that in like Laravel or Symfony or?
It would be built into our SDK directly. There
I mean,
are
like
in
in
Laravel and
the
other frameworks, there
frameworks.
are queuing mechanisms that you can use. You have that any language, it's just the queue package that comes in.
Yeah.
I'm taking a look right now to see if our SDK, our PHP SDK, has some rate limiting backoffs or anything inside of it. It doesn't look like. I'm taking a look right now.
Okay. And for context, my application does wellness checks to residents to make sure that they're okay. Government agencies are my customers, so police stations across the country. And so, at times I'm doing maybe 100 calls for a given period of time. And so managing it and being able to just send a whole bunch at once would offload some work, but again, it's not mission critical. I just wondering if that was available.
So if you're doing a lot of critical like infrastructure stuff, when you're doing a lot of calls and SMSing, messaging and stuff like that, it's probably best to contact our account services team and get those limits sort of increased. What we're going to do is we're going to create a contract with all the telcos that are applicable. So that this, because a lot of our rate limits don't come from us directly, it comes from the CSPs, the telcos, and how often we can send them messages, which is why those limits are in place. But we do have means of increasing that for phone calls and for SMSing and everything. And
Okay.
we can definitely support your use case and come up with a good plan so that you're able to accommodate the needs of these users who need the critical calls and stuff.
Yeah, thanks. I'm working with David and I believe Heather as well, an architect. I
Okay.
think that's her name. Um, yeah, I don't
Mhm.
want to take up all you guys' time, but yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. That would be the best thing I would say. So,
I just dropped a blog post in the chat, link to a blog post about, it's a few years old now, but it's about building or like respecting rate limits with next exponential backoff. Like it looks like the examples are in JavaScript, but like
That's
on a
that's
conceptual
async
level,
Python actually.
oh, it's async Python, sorry.
Yeah.
Was this one of yours, Max? No.
No,
Oh,
this is way before.
2020, so it's before your time, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, so the examples in Python, but I guess conceptually it'd be the same in whatever
Okay,
language you're using. So might be some
awesome.
use, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I guess alternatively, what you could do is, yeah, building something that just pushes till you hit the rate limit, catch the error, wait a defined period of time, i.e., like a second, and then continue would work. And it would be a bit janky, but that would probably also do it without dealing with this sort of the limits changing.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Leon. Thanks very much.
very, very question right there.
Yeah, great question. Let's see, what else have we got here? So Anujan is now saying they want to build either a healthcare app or an app to tackle pollution. Okay, those are nice choices of things that you could make. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about what you're envisioning in terms of using a Vonage API? Like the healthcare one makes a bit more sense to me immediately in terms of how you could use a Vonage API directly, because we do have people and customers in the healthcare field who are using our voice and video API solutions and things like that, where, for example, you can build a video chat with a healthcare provider. About pollution, I'm not really sure specifically what you mean there. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, what that might look like to you, like how you imagine an app like that working? That'll be really good to know. Yeah, I think just having a little bit more detail about what exactly you want to do with Vonage would be really helpful for us at this point. I will say as well, there is there's another person in the chat as well. So again, if you'd like to raise anything, we can get to you next as well. So please do feel free. If you've got any questions or anything you want to say about Vonage, please let us know in the chat. Yeah, until then, I guess we'll just wait for Anujan to just tell us a bit more about their specific use case.
I do have an example of using our APIs with MongoDB. Um, it's actually our trivia game that we demo. So a while ago, I created a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire clone trivia game using our APIs for doing calls, text messaging, receiving them, responding to them, all of that. And basically, we're storing the game data inside of Mongo itself. So it will
Could
respond
you,
back.
Chuck, could you maybe share your screen there and show if you've got it on GitHub or something?
Yeah, I do have. Yeah, sure. Let me get that over here. I have a widescreen monitor, so give me a second to start OBS so you're not seeing everything super small. That over there. There we
You mean
go.
you don't want to use the Vonage magnification API?
It would be it still does not help. It's still very small when you try to read it. So I just use OBS to show that side of my screen here. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff showing up. There we go. All right, are we seeing my screen okay?
Yes, I see your screen there.
Perfect. So basically all this is doing is using the built-in MongoDB client inside. And then all we're just getting the client and then I'm just writing data to it. So I'm just saving all the different games to it by getting the Mongo client, which is cached, writing the game data to it. And this right here is what I want to talk about is the update audience choice. So if you're familiar with the concept of it, I'll briefly explain. But what you get is you get a couple of helps that come into play. They're called lifelines, and one of them that we implemented here.
Chuck, could I just jump in a second
Sure.
and just say two things? One is that I know Jen's given a little bit more detail, which might steer just how you explain this, but also
Right.
you might want to explain the overall purpose of this game because I think I don't know if maybe you skipped over that. I didn't quite remember you saying that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting into. So it's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and one of the lifelines you get is asking the audience for what they think the correct answer is. So the way we're handling this here is the audience will text in their letter choice, which will then be responded. And every time they do, we're just calling update audience choice here, which is just incrementing what they chose as their answer. To see how this plays out, I need to go over to our server over here. And every time we have a inbound message coming in, which is all the way down here, we're calling this process message. And what process message is doing is just calling process audience response from the game, which makes the call. Yeah, so basically what this is doing is getting our Mongo client going into process audience response, which we just saw, and then it goes and just increments that count. So if they chose letter A, it will just count up letter A using the built-in Mongo. So as you can see, it's kind of easy just to go in and get what you need to do. So update audience choice right here is what's being processed. Gets the question, just increments that right there, and then it will show up inside of the app itself. Unfortunately, I cannot pull it up at the moment because we recently configured it for GitHub Universe. So everything is pointing over to there at the moment, and there were some changes that have been updated for it. But yeah, this is kind of how you would do it. You would just kind of separate out your calls coming in right here, build out your whole data layer inside of Mongo, and then just update what you need to update. So I can post this in the chat as well too. And feel free to get updates for it as well. But there's the whole repo. And then if I show, I will just paste in that line right there, which is the function that we're looking at right now that makes the call itself.
That's JavaScript there. So
Yep.
obviously it'll be a bit different in Java.
Yes.
Maybe we'll grab Sina in a second, who's our Java advocate, who can tell you. But I'm just going back to your use case there. You've elaborated a bit there, Anujan. Thanks for that. You've said, suppose an area is heavily polluted. You want something that can send an alert or tell a user, hey, don't go to this route. It's very polluted. Go down another route. That totally makes sense. And you might want to then share it like a video or something like that. That's a very sensible use case for Vonage APIs. Yeah, definitely. So if you've got your integration working in terms of MongoDB to get whatever data you need, it will then be the case where you need to send, say, an SMS to a user or send them a WhatsApp message or send them even an automated voice call, something like that. That is all possible with Vonage APIs. So it might be good, Sina, if you maybe want to jump in here as our Java advocate to talk about how this maybe could be done to send an alert with Java.
Sorry, I have to go close the window. The context is alerts, right? You mean
Yeah, so we've got somebody here who wants to make a project in Java connecting MongoDB and a Vonage API, so that they can then, I guess, pull some data, and based on that, they can send an alert with Vonage.
it depends how you want to send the alerts, because like pulling data from MongoDB, I guess they have their own APIs for that. You're not going to build a sample app live in MongoDB, right? So it is how do you want to send the alert? Like, is it through SMS or?
Yeah, how do you want to send that alert? Maybe while they tell us, maybe you could just start showing, for example, how to do that with the messages API, and we could go from there.
Send a text with the messages?
Sounds good to me. We'll start there, and if they say no, I must have a voice call, then we can change what we're doing.
Sure.
Or WhatsApp, or WhatsApp's also pretty common.
Oh, they've said SMS. So yeah, SMS would be great.
Yeah. So.
And we can also support RCS as well too, Rich Communication Services.
Depends on the country, right? It's not available everywhere.
It's not available everywhere yet. We're still opening it up, but yes.
I've got to be honest, I totally thought you meant the Pokemon for a second.
Yes, so we have code snippets for all of our APIs. I'm going to show you it in the IDE. So for SMS, you would just build a client and then build your message. It's really just that. So, of course, the application logic of when you want to send this would depend greatly on what you're building. Like, I'm really not sure what.
Yeah, I think actually sending the SMS is probably the most straightforward part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just like one method call basically. Well, a couple. You build it first, right, and then and send it. But yeah, you can hook that up in like multiple different ways, I guess, depending on the logic of your application, like how you want to send the alerts, what triggers them. But that's kind of, I guess, that's outside the scope of what the actual APIs do. That's really down to the business logic of your specific application, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Okay, well, any thoughts there, Anujan? Anything else you'd like to ask, or anything you want to clarify there? Let's see. Thanks a lot. Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, if there is anything else, any other questions, do let us know. Looks like there's a couple of people there who maybe want to. Oh, it looks like we've. There is someone else watching. Well, if you have a question, please do ask us. If you don't, no problem, because I think it would now be a time to maybe talk about one of our projects that we want to talk about. So, does anyone really want to jump in now and talk about a project that they've been excited about? / Little Talks / Maven rant / Neovim rant / Python rant. Chuck, for example, why don't you talk about Neovim for a sec?
Sure. I guess I could talk about it. So let me just go ahead and share my screen real quick. So I have Vim open in here. Let me get the screencast going. Perfect. So now you can see the keys I'm typing in here. And let me just make this a little bigger for those of hard of hearing. So I basically thought I can talk about my top 5 Vim plugins and what they Neovim plugins and what they're good for right here. So I have a couple of them in here. I'm going to start with the number 5 and then go up to number 1. And number 1 is the I need this one. This is the absolute one that I want to have, and I think everyone else should have. So I think the first one would be camel case motion. So in the JavaScript world, sort of the unspoken convention of how you're transcribing your variables is to use the camel case notation. And I have here a little example. This is from the new CLI that I'm working on right here. And if I come up here to line 22, you can actually see that there is some camel casing going on inside of it. So if I want to jump across the words, I just do word and then it brings me to the top. But if I then type word again, W again, it will jump me over to the next capital letter that appears. And by default, if I were to use this without camel case motion, I'm just going to use this line right here. If I jump to word, you see it jumps ahead over it right there. So by having this in here, it helps very much navigate the Vim world, the Vim use case in here. It also applies not only to motions, but other motions as well too. So if I do like change world status URL, and then I want to do hello, you'll see that it updates inside right here. So as you can see, it's very helpful to go ahead and do what we need to do in terms of the JavaScript world and making the motions nice. I can, if I come down here, oops, 16 down, and then do 5 words, jumps over there, but moving forward, moving backwards, you can see that it really helps out. And this is one of the reasons why I use Neovim as opposed to some of the other IDs out there that do have Vim support. And that's because it will follow the Vim standard, which is it's just going to the end of the word, next space, next punctuation mark, etc. So that's my number 5 one. The next one.
Question on that, Chuck. Sorry, is there a similar one for snake case? Because that would be awesome.
It can do snake case as well too. Yeah, it will also do underscores as well. Let me I'll skip ahead a bit and just do this right here. So that was another plugin right there. That's my number 1 plugin. We'll get to that one in a second. But if I come here, I do that, word, jump across, right? You'll see it's following snake cases as well too with the underscores. And if we go up here to 5, right? 5 lines up, you can see, oops, my finger slipped there. You'll see it also follows dashes as well too. So it greatly enhances the motion controls that you have inside of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use Vim. I use VS Code, but I would still be excited about that. Oh, there's a good question from Sina in the chat. Maybe Chuck, you want to answer
that? Let me jump back over to the chat and see what we have here. Is there a plugin to exit Vim too? Yeah, you just do Q. colon Q. Comes up right there. And that also was an honorable mention one. The next one that I personally cannot live without is called Bufferline. Too hard. So with Bufferline, basically everything inside of Vim is a buffer. So every time you open a file, it creates a whole new buffer for you to work in. And this is one of the powerful things about Vim. I won't go into too many details about them. That's sort of outside the scope. But if you open up a lot of files at the same time, so let me just, I don't know, app something and then users, and you see I have a bunch of files open right here and I need to jump across them and see what's going on. It's kind of hard to know what buffers I have open and which ones I'm going to have to use. So if I my screen share showing it up here, you can't really see my mouse, so it's kind of hard to focus. But at the very top, I'll make this bigger, you'll see that I have a little tab line up here. I'm going to click on them so you can kind of see what's going on without being too distracting. And this shows all my different open buffers right here. So the first number we see is the actual buffer number. So that big one is the buffer number, and the little number, the .1 that we have here, is basically like the tab number, I will say. So if I just do B73, you'll see I'm jumping over to the next one. If I do B146, I see that I'm jumping over here. And then of course I can, jump across them as I need to as well. So, BP2 and 3 and move all around and jump across right there. So it gives you an example. It gives you a quick view into which buffers you have open so that you can instantly jump between them and make your life much easier in terms of navigating. Now, there are some other ones out there that are that can handle this and jump through. One of them would be stuff from the Primogen, right there, but I never really liked our customization inside of it. So this one gives you nice customization. What you can do, you can see here, it's showing me the type of file that's open. So if I jump over to like package JSON, you'll see it shows that it's npm showing up right over here. If I go to a markdown file that we have, so if I go to, for instance, our code of conduct file, you see it's showing up markdown over here, so you get more insight into what you're seeing. The question mark coming up on the end is that's actually a quirk. I just updated ZSH, so some of my fonts are off right here, but it'll actually show this file has been modified through Git, so it actually will tie into Git as well too. So we see all that. The next, my number 3, and this is relatively new, is actually Vim Copilot. This will work in Neovim and native Vim as well too. It's put out by Microsoft, so you need to have the Copilot license as well too. But it really does help when figuring out what the code is going on here. So let's jump into, I don't know, let's go into command for creating a application right here because it came up earlier in here. So if I jump down over here at the bottom and I just do if, and then I'll do org v, and then you see it's actually pulling up, it's deducing that I have a flag called private key file right here and actually suggesting all the different things that I might be wanting to do inside of it. And all I did was just type in if, popped up what I wanted, and then tab. And you can also get into more detail with it as well too. So if I do if arg private key file, right, and then you see here, this is just filling in some of the different stuff coming in. I come down here and I do tab, and I don't want to do that. I want to do console.debug private key file save to, and then it fills it in right there. And then you see coming in and greatly helps increase the amount of typing that I have to do. Decreases all of that. So Copilot integration right in. Again, you need to have a Copilot account to go into it. So make sure you have that set up as well too. Next up, this
Actually,
one.
I'm gonna just jump in and stop you right there, Chuck. We'll save that exciting part for just a second because we've got a couple of things. We've got Leon's actually asked another question, and I'm just wondering if maybe we could take a bit of a break and jump in and answer the question, and then we can come back to you. He's just asking regarding webhooks. Is there a way to programmatically get all the events that took place during a call using the con UUID? For example, if I want to ensure I don't miss a webhook again, a webhook event during a call. And my answer to that personally would be I've done some playing around with this recently. There's not like a specific Vonage utility for that. But what you do in PHP, we provide I don't know what the term is, but I think something so that you can hydrate an object with the contents of an event webhook. I think I'm saying PHP words in the right order. I have no idea. But basically, we do provide a data model for you. So when you go on the Voice API, you can set that event URL where events come back to you. And in that specific case, what you do is, I guess, hydrate that object. I think that's the term, Chuck. Maybe you know, but yeah, basically you do that, and then you'll just take the that UUID yourself, and you can serve that wherever you need to do it, and that would just be done on a server yourself. I don't think we have a specific utility for that, unfortunately, but it is quite in terms of that, at least that specific thing, that's relatively straightforward to do. I've done something similar with Python recently, and it's a pretty simple process to do that. Yeah, any other thoughts on that? Any other way to make sure you're not missing webhook events during a voice call?
Sina mentioned the get events API call and the conversations API. Maybe you want to go into more detail on that, Sina?
Yeah, I think the question wasn't like how do I create a webhook object in PHP. I think the question is more like how do I get the events that took place right, if I'm understanding it, because you're talking about conversation UUID, so you're looking at kind of multiple things happening during a call. So yes, yeah, exactly. So the Voice API doesn't offer this directly. Like you will get informed of events through the event webhook URL if you have that set up. But if you miss that somehow, let's say you didn't have it set up, or the server that you're listening for webhooks on went down and you didn't have a fallback, then you can still get events through the conversation API. Using that, it's a little more involved because there's lots of different types of events. So you're going to have to filter through and use some of the filters on that list events endpoint to get what you're looking for. But it is possible. It's perhaps not the envisioned way that you would do it. The idea would be to have kind of your webhook set up and intercepting events as they happen, and using that in real time, and then you can kind of dispose of those or persist them for longer, because like by default I think we persist the events. I can't remember if it's for 7 days or 30 days, but they will eventually be deleted. So if you need them for long term, then the recommended way is to set up your webhooks on your application so you don't miss them. I hope that answers it.
Very
You're
helpful.
welcome.
Thanks, Sina. Thanks very much
Yeah.
for that.
I also think that Git events might have a little lag behind it. I think there is some delay in it coming in and going there. And another caveat with the Conversations API is that it's region based. So make sure you pass in the correct region URL into the SDK. In terms of the PHP SDK, that is done when you're building out the client. You pass it in. It's the same with the Node SDK as well too. And if you go to our Conversations documentation section, you'll actually find out all the different regions that you can select from and where they're going to, so that this way everything stays within region. This is for GDPR and HIPAA compliance, because some stuff can't be exfiltrated out of Europe, for example, or the US, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool. Awesome. If there are any other questions, okay, thanks, Chuck. Yeah, Leon says thank you. If there are any other questions, again, from anyone who wants to ask, please feel free to do so. Yeah, about, let's see. Sorry, I'm just getting a message there. Yes, so in that case, Chuck, why don't we go back to you for your rundown of your Vim plugins, Neovim plugins, sorry.
Sure, absolutely. Let me set up my screen share again. And I forgot which one I left off at.
Just start from the top.
Just start all over again from the top. All right, so number 5.
Copilot, I think. Copilot.
Yeah,
Copilot,
you just mentioned
yes.
the Copilot integration.
Well, have you done with that? I'm not sure if you've done with it.
Yes, Copilot. That was the next one right there. So the next one is kind of a toss-up, but I decided to put this one in the top 5 because it definitely helps with a lot of the way sort of I program, where I'm just sort of going all over the place and doing different things. And this is the automatic linter plugin right here. So what this is going to do is actually run the linter that we have set up. In this case, we're using ESLint. And with that, if I type in something here, so if I go and I do if foo equals true kind of thing, and then I do this here, and then I do multiple, let's say that right here, foo is true, and then I do that. Now you see here, I'm getting all this different stuff in here saying foo is not defined, expected indentations of 4 spaces, but found 7. So this is actually coming from our linter, making sure that we're not using undefined variables or that everything's formatted correctly. I'm not going to get into tab spaces and lists and what goes on in the linter inside of it right there. But what's nice is that this will automatically run whenever I save the file. So again, for those who don't know, you do :W, that will save the file. And then when it gets updated, you notice that it took this line right here and indented it back 2 spaces for me. So this way it's set up correctly. And if I go in there again, you'll see, yep, expected right there. So I'll do delete delete there. So true, coming in right there, undefined constant and all that. So it's going to go in there. So that's the dense analysis ALE plugin. I say it's a must-have. This one also works with native Vim as well too. So you don't have to, so if you are using native Vim and not using Neovim, you can definitely use that one as well. So yep, that was number 4 right there. I do have a couple of honorable mentions that I think I want to put in here. One of them is the Git gutter. So if I come in here and I'll just type in, this is a comment, and oops, That's Copilot coming into play right there. This is a comment, and then I come down and then do another one, right? Something like that. If we notice all the way on the left-hand side, we'll see these plus icons coming in, and this is actually coming from Git. These are changes I've done to this file that have not been stashed or committed yet. So you can actually see the different states that you're coming in. Plus means that it's being added to this file. There'll be a minus if I delete something. So if I just go 7up and delete that, you'll see that there's a red minus. If I come in here and do that, you'll see it's a yellow tilde. So I can easily see what has changed within a file, what has been deleted in a file, and what I'm adding inside of it. So when creating new files, it can get very busy because the whole thing will just be additions coming into play. So we got that there. So that's my first honorable mention. Oops, delete one down. There we go. My next one that's an honorable mention, I can't showcase this now because I just did an update to the plugin and it's not working. But this would be the Neo test plugin. And basically what it will do is run your test suites. It can run the entire file. It can run an individual test. So let's go ahead and open up a test file. We'll do this one right here. And the idea being is that if I go down to a test, so we'll go down to this one right here, I can just do leader T and it should run. But as you see, I'm getting a little error right here. I got to figure out what's going on with the new one. But this will actually run it and show you up the results right here. You may have noticed my next honorable mention, which was that little pop-up right there. Let me just run that again. So this up here, this error message is called the noise plugin. And this is really nice, pun intended, because now we're seeing it up here. We're seeing the timestamp, seeing what the error message is coming up. With Vim, by default, you're always seeing your messages down here at the status bar. And it can be a little hard to read. It's always hard to see what's going on. You see, I can't really highlight it on my mouse, but it's all the way at the bottom down here. And I also have a little shortcut so I can take those out because it can get very noisy. But any type of messages that's going to show up inside of Vim, you'll show up right there. So if I just show the messages, you'll see, let me show it up right here, and then I can jump all the way down, and you can see all the different messages coming up. And then my last honorable mention would be telescope undo. So if I do leader undo, I can see all the different undos that I've done on this file, how long ago they were, and then I can actually restore them back if I want to and see the diff coming into play. I'm not going to do that because I will screw up all my testing. So those are some of my honorable mentions coming in. So now my number one plugin, and this probably will come without a surprise, we've already seen it, it's called Telescope. So if I just do, so the leader key, and then I do SF, so search for a file, this will pull up a list of all the files from my current working directory recursing down. I can move up and down. I get a little preview coming in, so if I'm looking for something, but I can even type in. So if I do like create, come in here, and we'll go to conversations create. I can actually see what I'm looking for in the file, get a preview, and know, oh, yep, this is the one I want to go to, versus the users create, so I can see exactly which one I'm doing. So we'll jump into here. And then another fun feature is that it has a live grep. You can configure it to use whatever grepping tool you're using. I'm using FZF, the fuzzy finder. So if I do leader SG and I type in something, so let's do application, you'll see everywhere the word application shows up is showing up in the file, and then I can look into the description, find exactly what I'm looking for, go up and down. I can get a little bit crazier as well too, and do like we can do display application and get really narrowed down into what I'm looking for inside of my Vim file right here. So yeah, so those are my top 5 Vim plugins. Hopefully those are
Nice stuff, Chuck.
I should say Neovim, but yes, some of them work in there.
I have a question for you, actually, Chuck. So, would you have any advice for someone who maybe wants to check out Vim or Neovim, but has never tried like a terminal-based editor before? Like maybe just someone who uses VS Code.
Yeah, definitely.
And transitioning to like Neovim.
Yeah, so I would suggest when I was learning Vim years ago, so I don't say how old I am. There's a couple of plugins available for the popular IDEs out there. JetBrains has one, VS Code has one, and that allows you to run Vim commands inside of your terminal. And what's nice is you can toggle it on and off. So as you're getting comfortable with how to use Vim, about motions and actions and variables and all that other stuff. It supports native Vim out of the box. You cannot add plugins to it though. That's the big problem right here. And oh, I should have also mentioned why I'm using Neovim instead of Vim, and that's because in native Vim, the JavaScript debugger is kind of borked at the moment, and the Vim community doesn't get a lot of update, but Neovim does. So that's why I'm in there. So you can get used to basic Vim inside of it. There's also the Vim arcade game, which tells you how to do all the motions and jump through. You have like a maze you got to walk through and do specific motions and stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun to get into there. I should actually try it and see if I got my score a little better. But those would be the two options I'd say. Find your Vim plugin inside of your IDE, play around with it a bit, or try out the Vim game as well too and go from there.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting as someone who doesn't use Vim. I use Nano in my old job quite a bit just for, on the fly editing. I think it's, I see Vim specifically when I try and do a merge in Git and it opens up a Vim editor for me and I press, :WQ and I never think about Vim again. That's my Vim experience. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like there are some advantages to using it in the terminal, in VS Code though, that you've just kind of mentioned. I mean, yeah, definitely something to look at. Yeah,
I even think some of the, I'm going to switch back over here again,
Mhm.
just to see here. And then if I go back to my terminal. So what's nice about some of the stuff in Vim, let me just create a new one here and we'll jump into my CLI. Right. So let's say I want to do some crazy rebasing stuff inside of Get. So I want to do rebase -I head tilde, and we'll do, I don't know, 40. So let's say I want to squash 40 commits right here coming into it. One of the nice things about Vim is that I can do something like this where I can say change word, I want to squash that one. I escape, I come down, and then I just repeat it by just hitting the dot. So as you can see here, I'm just doing that. Another thing I can do is I can start a macro. So Q starts a macro. W is going to be the name of my macro. So now I'm going, well, let me do that a little faster.
So what's a macro, Chuck?
So macro is this. So if I come back, let me get out of it. So QW. So I'm saying I'm going to create a new macro called W. I'm going to start 0, change word. I'm going to say S, that, go down, 0, and then quit. So now I've just created a macro. I can actually do 33 at W, and now it's changed all those 33 lines to squash them down, come into play. So basically you can just take your macro and have it run a set of commands as you need to. I have a couple pre-programmed ones where I can change things to camel casing. I can go through and take like a list of variables and then make it into a JavaScript object for JSON. A couple of other fun little tricks and quirks that you can do inside of Vim. So next time you're here, Max, inside of the Vim editor, hopefully you can see that pretty powerful in what you can do.
Cool. Very cool.
Let me just quit without saving so that nothing gets rebased down.
That's how I usually do it too.
Yep.
Well, that's great. Awesome. So it looks like now Sina is requesting that we spend the rest of the session roasting Vim. I think that's a valid option. That's certainly an option. However, I'm not sure if that's our only option. For example, what we could do is see if there's any of the questions that people have that are still lingering. Alternatively, I think while people might be thinking, let's maybe talk about one more thing. So let's do monorepos because I want to talk about monorepos. So you might not know if you're sort of depending on your usage with Vonage APIs. But the Node SDK and the Python SDK both use a monorepo structure. That's basically we have multiple packages which are all published separately, but are actually contained in the same repo and are all pulled down together to work with the Vonage APIs. And that's a pretty cool system. I know Chuck's been doing this for a long time. I started to do this with our new Python v4 that's going on. And yeah, I've definitely noticed some big differences in that. So yeah, I think it might be interesting to show how that's been done in Python, and maybe Chuck, if you're okay with it, you could talk a little bit about how that's working in Node.
Sure, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, chime in when you want.
Great, sounds awesome. I'll shout you. So first of all, let's see if I can share my screen. Here we go. I will be sharing my screen. Entire screen. Hope for the best. There we go. Awesome. So can you now see a terminal by any chance? And from my VS Code editor right now, actually. Open question. Is that something people can see? I assume I've shared this correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks. So what we've got here, this is the Python SDK. And what we would typically have is when you actually install the Python SDK, what you would do is you would type in pip install Vonage, effectively that. And what it will actually do is it'll pull down not just Vonage, but a lot of other packages. So we've got our top level package, Vonage, but actually that doesn't really do that much. You can see here, it's got all of these dependencies, which are just actually the other packages which have all of the API functionality. So for example, if you want to send a voice call, then it'll pull in Vonage Voice. And if you want to do stuff with our video API, it'll pull in Vonage Video as well. So when you actually do that, when you actually look at what's in your when you actually look, I keep typing the wrong thing. When you look at what's in your environment, you can see we've actually got not just Vonage, but we've actually got these dependent packages too. And this is kind of interesting because what it means we can do is rather than just having one version for this is Vonage version 4, we can actually say individually the packages that are inside of there, when did they change? And that helps us with maintainability. It also helps us with debugging and working out exactly when an issue was introduced, if anything does come in, things like that. So there are advantages to having a monorepo structure like that. But more importantly, we can actually use this to our advantage in that we can do things like using tools to cache our testing, only rerunning what we want to do. So for example, I've just been developing something, I've just been changing something. And if I do a test, I'm using a tool called Pants to do this monorepo management, which is multiple language. If I do a Pants test, there we go, and it will test everything, but you can see actually some of them have been cached. So you can see these actually, all of these tests, I've actually got hundreds of tests. Most of them have been cached because I've pre-run them. It'll only run ones that are either failing or there have been updates to those files. So it's actually able to inspect what you're doing and say, oh, actually this doesn't need to be rerun, but this one does. And so that's really useful. It also helps you with dependency management and works out exactly what needs to be packaged and when. There's something else I can do in that I can do Pants lint, which is an incredible name. But what this will actually do is it runs linting processes over the entire code base at once, and it does it in parallel. So it's a little bit faster than it would be otherwise. You can see here it's actually made some changes. It wants things to be changed. And then to fix that, again, it will work in parallel for a lot of these tools there. So you can see there now, for example, I'm able to just fix all of those things, reformat my code so it fits with the style guidelines that we've set at Vonage. And so we've got tools basically inside of here that can do all this kind of stuff. And if I, for example, want to publish these, I don't have to individually go through and version everything and publish it like in separate sections. I can do Pants publish. I'm not going to do this one because I'm not ready to publish the changes I've made to my code. But you can see here, if I do this, what it will basically do is it will package every one of these individually, and then it will push it all up to my artifact repo. I'm not sure exactly what the general term is, but it will push it to the Python package index. It'll put all the packages so they're available online, the equivalent of like npm or of Maven for Java. So that's a really kind of cool, quick look into this tool that I really like using and I think is really beneficial to use. So yeah, I don't know, Chuck, if you want to talk about your experience with using monorepos in Node.js with your tooling as well, if you want to just jump in on that.
Sure. So one of the things as we were developing version 3 of the SDK was that we wanted to be able to support our beta products without having it go into the main pipeline and then causing a bunch of updates that didn't really need to be there, or having unstable code next to fixing up stable code itself. So if there's a stable package, then we could potentially break that when really all we need to do is just add a new feature. What was recent? What was a recent beta product that we have in there? I'm trying to think. There was one very recently that we just created. Well, we had one, our conversations API was beta for the longest time. So we had a conversations package inside of the Node SDK, and then we just released that to GA. So when we did that, we were able to have conversations inside of it, and then when it was finally ready to go, all we had to do was just say, oh, this one's now public, so we don't have to do anything coming into it. So in terms of how it helped out our tools, it was absolutely breathtaking in making things a lot easier for us to use. One of the downsides we have is we cannot have individual packages inside. So for instance, our messages API, we're kind of always adding new channels on which we can send stuff to, and trying to break it out where we have the beta package for that channel was inside of it was a little difficult to do. So you kind of run into some of these little dependency problems in here. But for instance, I'm going to come into our catch-all SDK inside of NPM right here. And if you look, we'll see we're just pulling in all of the different packages here. And these are all our GA packages will show up inside of our catch-all SDK. So if you want just one, we just do Vonage Server SDK over here in the NPM, then you'll get access to all of these coming in here. But if we go into searching just at Vonage, you'll see we have a couple of other stuff that's not showing up in here. So let's go into, well, let's go into the JWT itself. So this package allows you to build JWT tokens for us. Coming in here, you'll see that if I just need to build out a JWT token, I can just run this package. I don't need the entire SDK suite. And then we don't have the black hole problem that comes into node modules where you have every single package coming in and it just adds more memory coming into play. In terms of tooling, it's fairly straightforward. If I come in here, so for instance, let's run a test where we're just working on a certain project. So we'll do select project. Here, conversations was the last one I worked on. So if I run this, this will just run conversations. And if I go into Vim, cd packages conversations, and then let's just update, I don't know. Let's just go into this one right here and jump down here and delete there, and then save that. Automatically run just the conversations portion coming into play. Anytime I save the file, bam, Jest will run inside of it right there and do the new update without having to run the entire suite. If I were to try to run everything, so if I just take off specific project and just watch all, you see it's going to take a little time to boot up and then actually run all the tests coming into play because there's a lot of mocking going on. So there's memory being built up inside of it, and there it goes. So let's see how long this takes real quick. So far, staying 21 seconds. So and all that. Yeah, so 21 seconds. So if I redo what I did here and then run it, you'll see I'm just doing 21 seconds to see if this one change I did came into play. So not only does it help us be more efficient in our development terms, but it allows you, the developers, to go ahead and just pull in what you need without having to have the bloat of everything. Like if you're not using, for instance, our numbers API and you're just using call or voice, you can just install the voice itself. And that'll be done by just doing npm install. Let me just get out of my SDK directory. Let me go into my tester right here. I can just do npm install at Vonage voice, and now we'll install our Vonage voice package coming in. Slash at Vonage. You'll see that we just have that in there. Let me move that out of the way. And then I can also install, we notice JWT showing up in here. That's further packages coming into play, but you can pull these in individually if you need to without having to go through the entire suite. I actually do this inside the CLI. So if I open up package.json and come down, you'll see I'm using specifically the auth, JWT, and conversations in here. So that this way we don't have to install the entire server SDK. Conversations is in here because it was beta for a while, so I can actually update it so it's not beta anymore, and I can remove this dependency. So that's the nice thing about this too, is that I can explicitly say I need this version of the conversations package, and then as I update the server SDK, this one will be resolved in as 171, even though let's say the latest one up there is 200, and then I'm not breaking my whole SDK, but I'm still have the latest and greatest server SDK catch-all stuff. So that's one of the nice things. You get that granular control on what versions that you want, like Max said.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I was sort of inspired by the Node SDK to write the Python SDK in that way too, because the Node SDK has been doing monorepos for quite a long time. And yeah, we have some of those features in the Python SDK too. There is some stuff that maybe is not quite as mature. We want to do some stuff like the automatic versioning would be amazing. You know, we're still working on it basically. But I think right now, let's just go to maybe our final little bit now, unless anyone has a question. But I think Sina, would you want to just talk about I know we have at least one Java developer in the call. So why don't you talk about Maven right now and just explain how you feel about Maven versus Gradle, and then maybe after that, if there are no questions, we'll end this session from there.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of, as someone that started working at Vonage and I saw Gradle everywhere, was like, one of the criticisms of Gradle is that there's so many different ways to do things. There's so many major versions. There's always deprecations and stuff. Yeah, I mean, the criticisms of Gradle are well known, and that's why there's now like a declarative Gradle project, because Gradle is literally a programming language, right? So let me share my whole screen, I suppose. So if I go to, am I sharing? I think so, right?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, cool. If I go back to this code snippet, it's here. This is a Gradle file, right? So you can, on the surface, it looks fairly straightforward. You're saying where I'm getting my dependencies from. I'm going to use this plugin, and you're doing configuration, right? And okay, I've got dependencies, and I'm saying what scope they're in, right? So implementation, I can have test implementation, I can have compile. That's compile only. Compile is actually removed. There's things, and then it's like to build a fat jar, it's this, and if anyone can tell me what this does and why it works and how it does it, applause points for you, because this is just basically a Groovy file, right? You could write any code you want here, and it will work. And this is what, right? This is a valid Gradle file. So when you see Gradle everywhere, and different versions of Gradle have different conventions and different things they can do. So one Gradle file might look very, very different to another Gradle file, even if they do the exact same thing. Because just there's so many different versions, right? If I go to Gradle, sorry, this is just a rant on Gradle. It's 8.11, but there are many, many versions, and they've changed it. Actually, there's even different DSLs. So if I go to the code snippets for Kotlin, I can show you, well, the settings. Look, I can configure plugins in like 2 different files. The settings Gradle and the build.gradle.kts, and this actually uses the Kotlin DSL. So you might miss it. You might think, wow, this looks very similar to the other one, but this is Kotlin. This is all Kotlin code, and this is all Groovy code. And you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. But yes.
Well,
so
Sina, the reason that you'd have 2 of those is so you can Gradle while you Gradle.
So you can what?
So you can Gradle while you Gradle, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So what I started doing is the Java SDK, for example, it was using Gradle, and perhaps I can even go to fact. I did check out. I can show you kind of the difference in terms of how things will work. If I do this very old version of the SDK, you will be able to see a build.gradle file here, I believe. And yeah, there's a lot going on here. So essentially, this is a library, right, that I want to publish to some central artifact. So I have my kind of plugins and configuration here, the versioning. This is at the top level. Notice how it says assignment not used, right? My ID is telling me it's not used. So but this is actually, because it's actually a project dot, and now it exists, right? Because that's a property on there. If you don't specify, at the top level is. So anyway, like all of this, and then you have, your dependencies and so on, tests, whatever. All of this configuration here, and you have to kind of know all of these things. You have to know what they do, and it's going to change between different versions. Then you actually, if you want to publish to Maven Central, build your own. Yes, you have to build a POM file inside Gradle, which it begs the question: why not just go straight to the source and do it yourself? And don't even get me started on kind of signing artifacts in Gradle, because that can be. Anyway, so I refactored this to use Maven. Now, what you will find with Maven is it is much more verbose, and this is the main criticism of Maven. So Maven uses POM files for packaging instead of build.gradle. And the way Maven works is it has different stages. So it has a life cycle, and it's a very linear process, right? So the way Maven is architected is you have the life cycle. These are predefined kind of phases, right, of a build. So you might clean, like, just gets rid of everything, all your artifacts. So I've got all this stuff here. I run clean, and it's going to get rid of everything here when it runs. Then validate, compile, test, package. These all do different things, and the way it works is you have plugins that bind to these phases. So you have the built-in ones from Maven. So these, and each plugin has goals, right? And each of those goals is essentially like a function that's going to run over some input, and you can configure these. And the way you configure all of this is in the POM file. So here, and everything here has a schema, right? Because it's an XML file, there is an XSD, so there is a schema. So every build that has a Maven file is going to look the same because it has to adhere to a schema. I can go over my IDE and it will tell me what is a name, the full name description. I have documentation for everything, right? Everything is structured in a predictable way. So if you're going from one project to another, every POM file is going to look the same if it does the same thing. And so I have all the information I need for publishing the project, all the properties. I can define variables essentially, right? And then use those variables later on. So for example, versioning and so on. Can do tests. I've made dependencies, tests only. So I can have different dependencies for tests as I do for compilation. I can even use a different version of Java for running tests as I do for, go here. So for the compiler, I can say I want to target kind of Java 8, but I want to use the latest shiny features of Java in my tests because I'm not releasing those. So I don't care about compatibility with Java 21. So I can do all of that. You try doing that with Gradle, you run into some problems if you don't know exactly which plugins to configure and how to configure them. And again, just writing the POM file, etc., is more straightforward. I think for publishing stuff to Maven Central, because in the Gradle file you have to write that anyway. You need all the metadata of having kind of your email and your contact information, all of this, and the signing and stuff. And that code there that was like building here, for example, this builds a jar with dependencies file, right? So it includes all the transitive dependencies. I can do that with a single plugin. There's already a plugin that does this. And in fact, if you read about the latest declarative Gradle stuff, it will tell you that the reason Gradle is so powerful is because it lets you do anything, but they don't want you to be able to do anything. They say you should put all your logic in plugins. Well, Maven, there is no way you can write any logic because it's XML. So the only way you can configure this is to write plugins. But guess what? There's already loads of plugins built in. All of these are built in to Maven, and you can just configure them, right? You can have you can bind them to set various phases. You can choose when they're run by just putting them in a profile, so you activate them when you run the profile, right? So if I do Maven, let's say package -p Uberjar, that should build for me the jar with dependencies. So yeah, I think Maven's a beautiful tool in that regard. And final thing I wanted to show is I had this JWT library that was written in Kotlin, and I refactored it to be written in Java, and it was using Gradle, and I changed it to use Maven. But the thing is, the test, obviously the whole project was in Kotlin. All of this now is in Java. But the tests were written in. I didn't want to change the tests because the tests are obviously working and you want to make sure that it's working as you wanted, right? And it was actually based on a different underlying JWT library. So you can have completely different workflows for your tests as you do for your like what you release. So I can say, well, the main project is going to use Java 8, right, for compatibility. But when I want to test it, I want to only use Kotlin for my tests. So I'm not distributing the whole Kotlin binary. I'm only using Kotlin in my tests, and I can still get all the coverage for that. I can run everything with that within Kotlin, and it all works with Maven. You don't have to use Gradle just because you're using Kotlin. You can mix and match, etc. And also you can obviously run Ant as well, Ant tasks. So if I want to bump the version, I can do that using a regex, and I can have that be run as a goal. So I can say, well, if I want to bump the version, I'm going to do Maven, I'm going to run the versions plugin, set it to the new version, and it's all configured here of what that's going to do. So when I run that, it's going to bind to this phase, it's going to run this. So you can do all sorts of stuff with Maven that's really cool, but people think that you need to have access to a full programming language to configure your build, but you really don't. Like, plugins are more powerful than people realize, and you can always author your own plugins too. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that.
Awesome.
I got
Thanks
a
very much,
question
Sina.
for you. Why does the Java community love XML so much?
Oh, they don't. That's why. Like, the thing is, there was a backlash, right? Because I think like in the mid 2000s and maybe early 2010s, it was like everything was just XML, and I think people just got fed up of XML. And I think the hate for a lot of XML-based tools comes from like, oh, XML is verbose. Let's not write HTML by hand. Let's have libraries to do that. Let's use YAML for everything. Not understanding that, yes, YAML saves you characters. Like, it's more efficient as encoding, but it's vastly more complex. Like, it's objectively true. Like, YAML is complex. Like, there's 65 ways to write multi-line strings. That famous Stack Overflow question. So I think it's just a rebellion against XML, but I mean, it's great for configuration. You have schemas. Like, I know JSON has schemas as well, but I don't think there is the tooling for it is as widespread.
Yeah, that's interesting because I actually, in my past working with, working in the DevOps world, one of the things I always did, especially because a part of that was also building out APIs and tooling and everything. So I did a lot of JSON schemas coming into play, and it was just easy as part of my tooling to say, oh, is this config file formatted properly so that this way I don't crash my entire server build? And when it came to some of them using XML, I couldn't really find any tools that will let me say, oh, this scheme is completely invalid coming into play, at least ones that were easy to use and configure. And also, some of the Java developers loved adding namespaces to the XML, so that made the schema validation even harder to do.
Yeah. Well, I think what we agree on is that schemas are a good thing, right? Like schemas help you understand things, they standardize things. And I think that's what the beauty of Maven is, that it has schemas. Like anytime you use anything, there's a plugin, there's schemas. Whereas with Gradle, yes, there's plugins, yes, there's documentation, but it's like it's always moving, it's always changing. So yeah, I think schemas are definitely a good thing to have in build tools. My view.
Cool. Okay. Well, I will say we've got a couple of new people who've just joined. So hello to you. I hope that you're having a lovely day so far. We have already talked about some stuff right now. So what I think maybe is the best thing to do is we'll just give you guys a minute. If you want to just ask any questions about how to use Vonage APIs, if you want to say hi, tell us what coding language you're working with or what projects you're working on. And just while we do that, while that's happening, maybe I'll just throw open to the floor just before see if anyone has any comments. Just ask, are there any particular projects that anyone here has been working on that they want to share? Either anyone in the chat or alternatively anyone on this call right now. Anything that's exciting that you've been working on?
I think Carl's been a little quiet this session. Carl, any fun stuff you've been working on?
What am I working on? I'm working on the sample app at the moment, which is so Rails 8 just came out recently. You've heard of Rails, and there is it includes this generator for building out like a basic authentication flow. So all the tools to do that were already in there, so you could build it yourself. But it just includes this generator, which like creates like all the routes and controllers and views and stuff that you need for just basic logging in authentication kind of thing, and a bunch of like helper methods and stuff. So I've just been playing around with that and looking to add like a two-factor authentication flow within that. So using that kind of those generated files as a bit as like a starting point, and just adding 2FA using our verify API to that. So I'm kind of halfway through it. So yeah, hopefully gonna finish that up this week. Might write a blog post about it, I guess. Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been working on.
Cool.
So yeah, always fun to work with new versions of things. Yeah, Rails 8 is quite nice.
I'm having an issue right now in that Python 3.13 came out in October, and yeah, it turns out that my Monorepo tooling doesn't support 3.13 yet. So I was trying to just hack it to get it to work. What I found was trying to support the entire version range of the versions we support in the SDK was not possible, just because the dependencies had changed at a certain point in that process, and so it was impossible to compatibly support everything with the same set of dependencies. And so in the end, I had to decide, okay, I guess we're gonna drop 3.8. It's now deprecated, so it's okay to do that. But yeah, that was a bit of a jolly time.
Yeah.
Sina's also said, sorry, Carl?
I was going to say, dependency wrangling sounds like lots of fun. Not.
I spent a lot of my process of time going through from V3 to V4 of my new SDK, just making stuff work like that. There's been quite a bit of that. I've enforced some minimum dependency versions now, which I'm happy about. So that's been a benefit.
You haven't had to deal with nodes module loading, because there's it feels like there's 8,000, but there's really 3 different types of ways you can load modules inside of Node, and they're completely incompatible with each other. So it makes it fun.
3 different ways. So there's you got CommonJS, 6 modules. What's the third one?
It's UMD modules. So UMD was sort of an older, I guess that's the wrong term for it. It was a different way of loading in sort of ES modules as well. So you had all those coming into play. But look, so I guess that's another benefit of the Monorepo for the Node SDK because we're using it in TypeScript, and then we transpile both out ESM and CJS, which are the common ones now. But it was recently announced that the next version of Node won't have that distinction because as they were going through and looking at the loading process of these modules, they found that it's really the same every time. So we didn't need to have all these crazy different ones coming into play. But I can feel your pain, Max, because there are some packages out there that only support CJS, others import ESM. And when you're using one or the other, you can't use the other one. So for instance, Chalk, which is used for creating colors in the terminal, I'm using that heavily for the CLI. Version 5 uses ESM. Version 4 uses CJS. And the CLI is written in CJS. So I have to make sure I do version 4. But whenever I say update all the packages, it wants to update the 5. So I have to go back in and change it and bump it back
and
down to 4.
The fun part of that you'll have as well, I guess, is if there's any sort of CV, then you will just have a bad time. And I've learned this one from experience too. Yeah, that's just how that goes.
It's kind of interesting to see how, because it's called dependency hell. It's not something new. It's been going on for a very long time, and it's interesting to see how nowadays it's the same problems that we've had 30 years ago. We still have these dependency problems. It seems we can't really get this to work out for some reason.
Everything old is new again, and the snake continues to eat its own tail. Yeah. Cool. Well, it looks like we've not got a much sort of. Let's see. There are a couple of people in the chat, but I'm not sure. I think at this point they might want to watch the recording if they were really keen to hear about one of the tools that we talked about earlier. I think right now, unless you've got a specific thing, any of the people in the chat, I think it's best to say thank you for coming today. It's been really nice to have a bit of a chat with everybody here. It's been nice to talk about some Vonage API stuff, to talk about some non-Vonage API stuff. So from my end, coming from mostly coding Python, hearing about different things inside of Java and inside of Node, inside of Ruby, it's been nice as well, just as a nice bit of a break from my usual work of mining out Python code in the Python mines. So I appreciate that. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to our wonderful studio audience. Thank you to our wonderful hosts. And Ruby Mine is an IDE. Well, that's enough of that. Well, I think let's say goodbye for today. But we will have the stream will be live. Thank you for that. So if you do have any questions, we can still answer those or get answers to you. So if you're a bit shy, you don't want to ask in front of us all, you can still reach out to us. You can also reach out on our community Slack. I'm sure that there'll be a link for that somewhere. And also, what I'd love to ask you to do before we go is there's a button that just says on the bottom of the screen saying share your feedback. And if you want to click on that and just give us any thoughts that you've had about being in this session, anything that you liked, anything that you wanted us to improve, let us know, and that'll be really helpful for us as well. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. And we will see you for presumably another one of these at some point. Take care.